Hello, hello. Welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Pale. I'm your host, Nate Pale. Super exciting guest today, Gerry McCaughey from Entekra. Entekra is a relatively new company in the building industry. It is an offsite construction fabrication company that is revolutionizing the way single family and multifamily homes are being built. Whether or not you're in the industry or not, I think you're going to find a lot of value in this. He takes a look at the way things are being done and finds a way to just make a better process. A lot of times people think they got the ideas, but it's all about the execution. He's going to talk about his amazing story coming over here to the United States from Ireland as a young lad, and then returning back to Ireland to develop his own offsite framing company, and taking that company, selling it, becoming back to the United States, and his journey to take on some big titans of construction and really revolutionizing the way things are built. Tons of knowledge. It's going to be an exciting show. And Gerry is just an amazing speaker and storyteller. Tons of knowledge. Hope you guys enjoy this one as much as I did.
Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with Nate Pale, the show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hi, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Pale. I am your host, Nate Pale. I am joined today with Gerry McCaughey from Entekra. And Entekra is a new company, fairly new, that's come out into the world of construction in California. And he's going to talk a little bit about some crazy stuff. But you have a nickname of being called Mr. Unreasonable. Where did that come from?
I honestly didn't know I had that nickname, Nate, to tell you the truth. I mean, I can understand why I do, but I don't know why I am Mr. Unreasonable. Although you bring up a good point. I mean, one of my favorite authors of all time is George Bernard Shaw, and he quite famously said at one point in time, "Nothing great was ever achieved by a reasonable man." Mm-hmm. So, I take it from that he means everything that really changes in life, somebody has to push the barrier. So once you stay inside the confines of everything, then you're a reasonable person, but you don't really ever change anything.
Yes.
And whenever you try to go outside the confines, some people will consider you unreasonable until such times as that new paradigm becomes accepted, and then they'll probably give you a different nickname. So I think every time somebody's trying to do something that's outside of the norm and you challenge their normal thinking on it, then their automatic reaction is to turn back and say, well, that person's unreasonable. But again, I mean, to add another quote to it, which is, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. So again, it's back to that situation of you've always got to push the boundary. And people don't like their conventional thinking being challenged.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think being unreasonable is a bad thing. I think, especially in the context that you've done it. So I bet we've known each other, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
And I probably first came across you on LinkedIn, of all places. That seems to be like the point of connection for a lot of people in business, is you start seeing a little bit of this or that on LinkedIn, and you say, hey, what are you doing? What do you got going on? And to give a little backstory, you have a company that is challenging the conventional thinking around how residential construction is built, specifically with the biggest trade that's in the process, which is the rough carpentry, the framing, the 2x4s that build the building, your walls and roof, and everything like that. And people have been talking about. Well, let me back up a little bit. So rough carpentry has been done for many, many, many years in the United States. Traditionally, you have a project where you're building houses and you ship all the materials there, and then you assemble on site and you go through a process. So you have a bunch of laborers come out, carpenters, and they frame a house, they move to the next one. But people have been talking about improving that process, bringing it into the 21st century, using technology to do things better. And they have this thing, that what they call panelized wall framing, where either you ship the lumber to the job site and you set up like a yard and you build the walls in a controlled environment. So hopefully the theory behind it would be like you're more productive because you have better working conditions, or you build those walls and stuff at an offsite facility, and then you put them on a truck and ship them out. But everybody that's been in the industry for a lot of years says, hey, we've seen it, we've tried it, it's never worked, it's never going to take off. But yet here you are coming to the United States. You're not even from the United States, so clearly it's a big step to come out and say, hey, I'm going to buck conventional wisdom, and I'm going to go into a country, I'm going to go into a state that's almost like its own country in and of itself, and try to do things completely and 100% differently than anybody's ever done before, at least in the United States, and take it from there. So what would make you think that was a good idea to do, and why did you do it? I
mean, California, well, I have to sort of go back a little bit in time to fully explain how this came around. I mean, in 1958, my dad, who was a carpenter, farmer originally, came up from farming background, but was a fully apprenticed carpenter, learned his trade, served his time. In the late 1950s, he left Ireland and went to New York. Mm-hmm. And prior to leaving Ireland, he was a carpenter, but he was what he would have called, he was a roofer. He would have cut roofs. And he would also, what he said himself, he was a finished carpenter as well, but also his main thing he always judged people by was how many doors could you hang in a day and hang them well. And he said that was the greatest way of telling who was a good carpenter. His view always was, that, of course, that he could hang more doors well than anybody else on the planet. But he is, and I'd say, probably the hardest working man I've ever met in my life. But he went to New York and discovered wood framing for the first time. When he went there, first thing he couldn't get his union card to work on a site, so he ended up being a bellhop, a taxi driver, and a maintenance man. And then eventually got his union card, and he went on a building site, doing what he loved, which was carpentry, and discovered stick framing or wood framing for the first time. Because in Ireland, at that point in time in the late 50s, there was no such thing as a wood frame. Everything was built block on block. It's always concrete, mm-hmm. which is, pretty much the way a lot of Europe was. Discovered this wood framing, and then in the early 60s went back to Ireland and decided that he thought this was a good idea. He's a carpenter. He wants to build houses now out of wood frame. So he decided to go into business, but it never, and this is funny, this is the European mentality, it never crossed his mind to stick frame. He went and he rented a small little building, and he started making walls and roof trusses with plywood gussets in a little building, bringing them out to site at the weekend and then erecting the house and then completely building it. So he was in the early 1960s, he actually wasn't he just started a company, he actually started an industry, but there was nobody else in it. And that company that he started off from nowhere, by 1985, employed 300 or 400 people and was doing about 1,500 houses a year. And it was a very, it was a small business, but it was very successful, and he had done very well for himself from nowhere. And then in the late 80s, he decided to get out of that business, and he sold out of it. And I had actually just left college at that point in time, where I did a business degree that specialized in marketing. And one of the things I did was I did a thesis on how to start up a successful business, which was around the offsite industry. So I'm doing this in 1985 as a 19-year-old, and I was doing it for no more reason than my dad was in the industry. That was all. So I wrote this report that said, here's how to go about building an internationally successful offsite company in a European context. And off I went then to California, believe it or not. So this is my second time living in California. I went off as a young lad, thinking I was going to spend 6 months in the US. Ended up spending years. Mm-hmm. Loved the sunshine. When you come from Ireland and you discover that big orange ball in the sky, it has a certain attraction to you. Yes. But one day I got a phone call out of the blue from my dad. He was now out of the business 3 or 4 years. And he had found the report I had completed when I was at University College Dublin. And he said, do you remember that report you wrote about building an offsite business in Europe? And I said to him, vaguely. And he said, did you believe it? And I said, well, I can hardly remember what's in it, but I don't think that anything I wrote in it I didn't believe in, but I can't even really remember what the report is. So he sent it to me. And then he said, now what do you think? And I said, yeah, I mean, I believe that what I wrote in it was the truth. And he said, why don't you come back then to Ireland, put your money where your mouth is, and let's have a go at this. And 3 months later, I got in a plane that flew back to Ireland. And myself and my brother, and called Gerry, and myself, my brother, and my dad, and another gentleman by the name of Jim McBride, decided to set up in a little small shed in a little town in Ireland called Monaghan to basically set up this offsite company to become the largest offsite company in Europe. That's what our intention was. Now, when I say we operate out of a building, it was 5,000 square feet, nearly smaller than most of the houses that we built. And we started that business in 1990, January the 1st, 1990. And by 2005, that was the largest offsite company in Europe. We had 5 factories, 3 in Ireland, 2 in the UK. We were employing 800 people. We were doing 8,000 houses a year. We had built the world's first 6-story wood frame building. We had done the UK's first zero carbon home, not zero net energy, but zero carbon home. So we basically had pushed the envelope of engineering and energy efficiency and manufacturing and production and showed how you could bring efficiency to the building industry. And we were selling like blue blazes. I mean, just the market was loving what we were doing because the more they saw it, the more they wanted it. And then at 2005 then, we were looking at where we were going to go next. And actually, I was, at that point in time, looking at the US market as the next market to attack. Because I obviously traveled here quite a lot and I've lived here and I'm going, these guys stick frame over here. We do everything off-site. Looks like to me that there's a great potential over here. So, but as it turned out, I got approached in 2005 and the company got sold in 2005. I stayed on till 2008 as CEO, and then I moved to California again. So the plan to expand to the US was gone, the company was sold, and I moved to the US again, this time for 6 months, for the purpose of completing a lifelong ambition, which was to learn to fly a helicopter. So that's how I ended up in California the second time. Although this time I was now married and had 1 child. And I can remember sitting down for breakfast with my wife about 6 weeks after we got here. And that was in about March of 2008. And my wife turned around to me like a scene from a movie and she goes, I'm not going back. I didn't know what she was talking about. I thought she was big into going to spin classes. I thought she was some spin class, something she wasn't going back to. I said, you're not going back where? And she says, I'm not going back to Ireland. And I said, that's interesting because you do know what an illegal alien will be because that's what you'll be. Now, I'd had my green card before, but I voluntarily handed it back in again when I went back to Ireland. So at this stage, I was on a visa to learn to fly a helicopter. So the whole idea of living here was a whole new thing that I had to go through in terms of getting the correct visa to be able to allow it to happen. But my wife was adamant she didn't want to go back. And I took the view, well, it's an interesting challenge in life here now. What do we do? And I thought, why not? So I got an immigration lawyer and I went about and I got what was known as an O visa, which was classified as a person of extraordinary ability. You know, it's an incredible title to have, but that's the title that it comes up with. You hate to say it to people. But that got me started. And I went into consultancy, basically in the construction industry in the early days. But at that point in time, we all remember 2008 and 8. I mean, the market was in free fall, complete and utter free fall. And I spent most of my time at that point in time actually trying to consult with companies to try to save them. And they were all, there was nobody was trying to grow or do anything new. Everybody was just trying to stay alive. And those days came and went, and I watched the market go through the pain that it went through. And then I'd always had the thing in the back of my head. Stick framing just seems to me to be so inefficient. It seems to me there's a better way. So as 2000, and I suppose around about the time of 2012, 2013, I started seriously again looking at the idea of off-site construction as a potential business in the United States. And I really, I suppose, went hard to work on it around 2014 in terms of doing the research. Because I couldn't, the one question I couldn't answer to myself all the time was, why are they not doing it? What am I missing? Mm-hmm. And I contacted a few of my old colleagues from my days back in Ireland, and I said to them, listen guys, I'm thinking about this. If I do this and I think it's ready to go, will you join me? Because I had been very lucky and privileged in my life to have worked with some of the most experienced offsite people in the world, who literally had, who had driven, both in engineering and energy efficiency and manufacturing. They'd broken all the barriers that people said couldn't be broken. And I amazingly, a bunch of them said, absolutely, we're on board. If you're going to do this, let's go at it. And so by 2016, 2017, myself and my colleague Bran Kyo, who was working with closely at the time, said, we can't see a reason why not to do this. And I often say in life, the easiest thing to do in life, Nate, is to find a reason why not to do something. Mm-hmm. And that's people's fear of everything. So it's easy to find a reason why not to do something. And so we were coming with that view in mind. So we can't find a reason why not to do it. It just seems this is a market that's open for attack if it's approached the correct way. And so we then looked at the United States as a whole. It wasn't the fact that I was living in California. We actually looked at the US and said, where's the best market to go after? And we did a very detailed analysis of all 50 states, looking at where the costs were the highest and where were the factors that would best favor us. And California just came literally, it was a big flashing red light from the very first moment we looked at it. Because you had high labor costs, you had a declining framing population because of whether it was immigration control or whether it was to do with the fact that people had gone out of the industry during the Great Recession, or whether people were getting older and retiring out of it. But it was clear that the cost to build in California, and to frame in particular, were going up and up and up, and the amount of available labor to do it was going down. Mm-hmm. So he said, this looks like the place to go. And so we broke it down into two markets. So there's Northern California and Southern California. When we examined that, we thought Northern California looks like a better option than Southern California because I think being close to the border, I think there was more access to labor. And so we decided we'll go after the Northern California market to test this. And we'll see if we're right. And so that was the initial thing, we went out and we set up a small business, and we rented a 27,000 square foot factory in a town called Ripon in Northern California.
Mm-hmm. And it's a little tiny town.
Little tiny town. Very, very nice people, incredibly nice people. And we were very, very welcoming to us. And we started there. In fact, I would say, the Irish were the second largest ethnic group in that town at one point in time. So there was that many of us. But it was a great town to start in. We built up some great relationships with people and builders who were willing to try us out. We did that. And I have to say, everybody that we started business with said, we've never seen this before. And this is always going back to your very initial question, Nate. When people say it's been tried before and I've seen this before, I know you're not saying this, but when people say they're actually not speaking the truth. They may think that they are, but they're not. Because off-site construction, as we know it as Europeans, there is nobody in the United States has ever done it before or is even currently doing it. We might say the Entekra now are trying it. But my family had a 50-year track record of doing this. But if you think that component manufacturing or guys who make wall panels, and I'm not criticizing them or running them down, but if you think that that's an off-site company, you're severely mistaken. You literally are comparing apples and oranges. Mm-hmm. And so when we brought our system and process and we'd say this, it's not a product that we supply. We don't talk about selling wall panels or floor panels or roof trusses. We talk about improving the process. So when we bring our process to a builder and he gets to use it, it's like his eyes open, and literally you get the comments of, wow, this is incredible. I didn't know this was possible. How do you do this? Where did you ever think about this? And it's funny, I even had this morning. We had a relatively large builder walk around our factory today. Now, when he came in here at the meeting before, he had the same views. Oh, I've seen this before, I've tried this before. By the time that he left here today, he was saying, I had no comprehension of what it was you guys were truly doing. He said, now I get it. Because when you see the level of technology, we have more technology in here than ever than put the first man on the moon. the detail that we go through in a building. We know where every single nail is in the building. We know where every single piece of material is in it. We know where every screw is in it. We can tell you the quantities of everything. We have done the engineering on the building. I mean, it's such a professional approach to construction that it amazes people, particularly in residential construction. So that initial reaction that we got from customers was so overwhelmingly positive. We actually said, okay, we need to go out here and raise some money and build a serious offsite business. The same type of factories that we had in Europe, because the factory that we opened first in California was pretty manual in basis, but it was doing the product and the process the way we wanted it, but it still wasn't as highly automated as the factories we'd be used to in Europe. So we went out on a fundraise, and lo and behold, we had found great partners. We found Louisiana Pacific, who we knew previously, actually 25 years ago, previously in Europe, because they were also invested in a company in Ireland called SmartSide, which was an OSB producer, and we were in contact with them back then. When they heard we were doing it in the United States, they were very much on board to come and look at what we were doing, and they agreed to invest in us. So we raised $45 million from Louisiana Pacific, and I'm sitting here today in what is undoubtedly the most advanced offsite factory in North America, and probably one of the top 5 in the world here in Modesto.
Yes. And I've been, blessed to be out there and see your factory, both of them, the one in Ripon and your newest one. Although when I visited that one, it was still in the putting the finishing screws and bolts together, but you could really see that the one in Ripon, if it was like 100, then this is like 10,000. Like that's how further, it's just.
Oh, this is
it's miles and miles apart from each other, and how much more advanced that one is. And the first one was really advanced too. So it's only imagine the thing.
Well, this is, I mean, and it is amazing when you think about it. We're yesterday. We're only really 3 months now operational. We still don't have all the automation operational. Actually, we should have the final piece of operational by the end of the month. But even now, like, our capacity here is designed to do about 10 houses per day. As of now, we're doing 4 per day. By the end of April, the orders are there. We'll be at 6 per day. So we have an 18-month ramp up to get to 10 per day. I mean, it looks like we're going to be way ahead of that long before that point in time. That's the reaction that we're getting from our customers. It's absolutely, it's incredible to watch them going, I did not know this was possible. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I know you have like a ton of videos on YouTube and on your website, and you go and you watch, hey, we'll show up on the job site in 2 or 3 days, or you might be probably a little bit faster on a single family home, but I saw you do some townhomes from basically a foundation with no wood on it to roof is sheeted in 4 days. And I think you're doing a house in basically 1 day, which if you're at all familiar with construction cycles, that's, amazingly fast. And you're also able to do a lot of that fabrication so much further earlier, because in California, you can't put lumber on a job site till you have streets paved. And it's always this big push to get to that point. And then at that point, your clock starts ticking to be able to build a house and get it turned and get it sold to a future homeowner. And that ability to offsite construct that home starting sooner than you could under normal circumstances and build it and erect it, that can bring a builder's time schedule down seriously a lot quicker. And that, means a homeowner can move in sooner. Everybody's happy with it, with that end result. So that's pretty amazing that you're able to do that. And there's really nobody else around that has that knowledge that you have and the capacity to implement it. So it's pretty amazing to see it all in action and really see what goes on behind the scenes from the early engineering upfront process, which you talked about processes too. It's like, I can't call you today and say, I need some framing done next week. Can you bang a few houses out? Like, I have to start talking to you early in the process and say, hey, I have a project. I want to build some homes. I'm going to be designing it. I need you to weigh in on the process, because the whole sequence of things changes because you're trying to look at the whole system as a whole, and things.
That's correct.
Different orders, different the way it's arranged comes together differently. So you have to involve you so much earlier in the process, but the end result speaks for itself clearly.
Yeah, really what you're trying to do is, I mean, we came across an expression in the US when we started here, which we'd never come across before, which you'll see written on drawings, which is field verify. We had never actually come across that before, because to us in the 21st century, with all this modern technology, why do you need to verify it in the field? Why can you not design it in advance, manufacture it, and have it go to site and make it fit? I mean, I often make the joke and said, do you think that the guys who built the International Space Station and sent it up, 20 or 30,000 miles into the air, into space, do you think that they ever had drawings that said field verify when they get up there? No. They're able to design it and make sure that it fits and it all goes together ever before it ever goes to a location. And that's the same with every product, except with construction in the US. The idea that I will not be able to know whether or not that works until I'm actually on the building site.
Yeah.
I mean, that says an awful lot about how the industry has not progressed an awful lot.
Yes. One of the things I think I've been impressed with in the whole time I've known you, and from my initial curiosity, I was like, hey, what do you have going on, to like, this is like fantastic. Like, how can we do this together? So I've been in Southern California, and you're not really in Southern California yet. You're mainly in Northern California. I think was your ability to say no is like, hey, we don't want to go into markets that we're not set up to be successful in. And we're not in markets. I also work for a company that builds apartments. So apartment construction is a little bit different than residential home construction, because homes get released in like phases of 8 to 10 houses, and then they get sold. And as they're getting sold, then more and more get released. So apartments tend to take 300 to 400 units, and they just get released all at once. And it's this big cycle. So once you start framing, you're shoving a bunch of houses into the cycle process all at one time. And we had discussions about like what that would do with being able to meet your other customers' obligations. Is like, hey, when it's in phasing, we can do some we can do some of that. So like you were very smart, but rigid, and like, hey, we're not going to take on any projects where we're not going to be successful until we can be successful in that market. And I think a lot of people, when they're in this, there's a lot of talk about prefab homes. There's a lot of talk about like container type stuff, like that's modular. It comes out on a crane and you just arrange it and set it up. And a lot of people have big backings of big tech companies in Silicon Valley, money behind them, but they're trying to bite off the whole package for everybody. And I see there being a lot of challenges to be successful, because you have to kind of master the market you're in. Construction, as much as you want to say technology can make it more efficient, it's still a very regional market. It's still a very regional system, and you can't do what you do in Northern California and Texas, and you can't do it in Florida. Like, every market has its own intricacies of how construction is built, depending on what's going on. Florida, it's hurricanes and winds, and California, it's earthquakes, and it's just different. There's so many differences in codes.
Absolutely. But we're very disciplined in our approach to our market entry, and I suppose, Nate, it doesn't matter what business you're in. The beauty about being in business multiple different times and multiple different iterations of that business is that you learn each time how to do it better. No matter how well you did the last time, every business person will always tell you, if I was starting out again, I would do this. So when we came to start up Entekra, which was the third offsite business that my family had been involved in, we had learned a lot from the previous generations when we had done it. And so we've learned over the years, well, you never bite off more than you can chew. I mean, the most important thing is to leave the last customer you have as happy as you can with you. He'll build the next customer for you. But if you go out there and you take on a big job because you think, oh, there's money in that and that's going to be great for us and we should be taking it on, and you fail at it, then you'll be fighting for years to dig yourself out of that negative hole. So we're extremely disciplined in saying, when we came into the market first, we said we are only going to do single family 1 and 2 story buildings until we get to know and understand this market. Because even in our time in Ireland, we had shipped houses through the UK, France, Spain, Japan, and we knew that every single one of them was different. And so we said to ourselves here, no matter what we think about what we know about this industry, we don't know California. Mm-hmm. So let's learn it. And so we wanted to use single family as being the way to learn and get, whatever painful mistakes we would make, we would learn them at a relatively low cost compared to taking on huge, big apartment projects. So we just said, no, we're not doing it until we understand. And actually, it's really only probably about 6-7 months ago, we said, something, I think we feel comfortable now that we're willing to go after multifamily. Mm-hmm. And then that's what we started to do. And we went after the multifamily projects, and we did. We learned a lot of lessons in the single family that we were able to apply. We've done the multifamily; they've gone incredibly well. But I think that was because of the disciplined approach that we had to it, and even that's down to doing hospitality, hotels, those kind of projects. We said ourselves, no, we're not going to do those until we get through the multifamily, because that's going into the commercial realm. So we've been very disciplined and controlled in our approach to market entry.
Yeah, I think what you said is if you do one customer right, they're going to build you to the next customer. But you're in this space too where there's a lot of people that have told you this can't be done. There's a lot of people that probably want to see you fail. There's a lot of, big established framing companies that said, hey, they probably don't want you to, they don't want you to succeed because they would completely be turning their business model upside down too. And they're not investing the effort in to be able to be competitive if the whole market switches to this way. And you're going about showing, hey, here's a little bit of what we can do. Here's a little bit more. And I think it's got people nervous. So I like the approach that you're like, hey, I'm not going to go out and botch one because people are expecting that to happen, and that'd be a tough hole to dig yourself out of.
No, and we won't. And again, genuinely, and I said this to anybody in any form of business, that we will not. We are very, very focused on that position. Your last customer is the most important person that you have. And to us, and it has been the case, Nate. I mean, you're right. There's people out there who don't want us to fail. And in fact, you hear it all the time, and you hear the misinformation that's put out by competitors out there about us. And sometimes you sit back and laugh and go, it's incredible that they would actually it's so childish in many ways. But the beauty of what we have and what actually has been working so well for us is when anybody has tried to use misinformation, say, to compete against us, all we've ever had to say is, do you want to talk to our last customer? That's all we ever say. Yep. And we give the phone numbers out, and our customers are actually delighted to talk to other potential customers. I think many of them actually feel a certain pride themselves in the fact that they were sort of pioneers in doing it, and it worked out well for them, and they're very happy to talk about the success that they've actually had with it. So, in fact, I even had that today with a builder. He said to me, I went to your customer and I asked them, and they said they have nothing but glowing reports to say about you guys. And that to me, and it's not just about the money, Nate. I mean, to me, this stage in my career, I want to leave a legacy, and everybody here in Entekra wants to leave a legacy behind them that's one of quality. We will never be the low-cost producer. We will never go out there to try to be the cheapest. We will always focus on trying to produce the highest quality. Now, that does not mean that we're not trying to lower the cost for our customer. We are, but we're trying to do it by a different methodology, which is let's not focus on making the thing as cheap as chips. Let's focus on making the system so efficient and the process so efficient that the customer actually ends up making more money at the end of the project. Now, that's a hard sell for most people because they're not used. They want to just go in and say my widget's 10 cents cheaper than your widget. We're having to go in and try to make the argument to say no. At the end of the day, our widget may be 10 cents more expensive, but at the end of this process, we're going to have saved you $500 on waste. We're going to reduce your cycle time by 30 days. You're going to have lower insurance costs because it's a safer site. Your brand is going to be better because when you bring your customer around our house, you can use the quality of our lumber and our framing to help you outsell your competitor down the street. Which, again, here's the interesting thing, I suppose, that's happened in the last, This really is, I suppose, an interesting. This is the market coming full circle in many ways, Nate. That when your customers then start coming to you and saying, guys, can you make us a marketing video that we can put into our sales suite to help us use the benefits of your system to help us sell our homes? We have now 4 customers who we have produced videos for who are using it in their sales suites because of the quality of our product. And that's when you know you're really doing something right. When your customer is using your product to sell their product.
Yeah, there's definitely a noticeable difference in the quality of offsite construction versus your traditional stick framing. I mean, they don't call rough carpenters wood butchers for nothing. It's pretty rough, and there's gaps in framing, and I can't describe it verbally. It's something that you have to see. I think that's probably a tool that you didn't have at your disposal in Ireland because it wasn't around as much, was social media and the ease of doing things, because you've been a huge, I guess, marketer, influencer, whatever you want to call it, on LinkedIn and YouTube, showing, like, if I went on LinkedIn, like, who was in my feed? It was always you, or is the company feed, and it was videos or photos of this or that. And anytime anybody engaged in, like, the typical arguments, like, I remember probably one of my most viewed, most commented on posts was I had toured a different factory that did offsite construction, not even offsite, they're just panelized walls in Oregon, and there ended up being this, like, debate in my feed of would panelized walls work or not work, and people were like, oh, it's bullshit, it's got waste, you're just not showing it, and it's at your factory, it's just not at the job site. And you're like, nope, here's the pictures to show it, here's the pictures, like, the quality's better, nope, here's a picture, and you're just constantly had this, like, everything was able to, like, I'm not just saying it because it's better, like, I can prove it to you. You want to come to the factory?
Well, I can prove it, yeah.
Always open doors to come in, and like you said, show me a reason why not, and you just can't find it. It just makes so much sense, at least for NorCal, and I expect it to start making sense in other markets soon too. Like, I just
to be fair,
it's the way it's going to go.
Yeah, to be fair, a lot of our customers in NorCal want us to go to SoCal, so which is what we hoped would happen as well. So that day is fast approaching, because that's the beauty of this as well. Once the builder starts switching across to this different system, I mean, they really want to start switching it all across. And now they're saying, okay, we're using it in Northern California. We want to go to Southern California. When can you come down here? We've actually had a builder say to us, I'll underwrite the first 1,000 units per year in your Southern California factory for up to 3 years to get you off the ground. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the kind of discussions that we're having. That's how happy the customers are.
Yes.
So it goes back to that point. So when people say, oh, it hasn't, and again, I'm going back to that point at the start. When people say, oh, this has been tried before and it hasn't worked. It has never been tried before. I think that's the point that you really need to get out. It hasn't been tried before. Yes. If you walk around our factory, you'll know it has never been tried before. Because you've never seen, you've seen it, Nate, but nobody else has ever seen the level of technology and efficiency. I mean, put it in context. We can produce the walls for a 2,500 square foot house in 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
We can precision nail the nails at 5.5 nails per second. Mm-hmm. It's not possible to do that under site conditions. Mm-hmm. So, and the more that's proven by physically seeing it, the more the builders go, okay, I got it. This is not the same as what I think it was. I've used that expression. It's not your grandfather's Oldsmobile. This is something different.
And I think there's some maybe concerns that, like, people would say, like, oh, well, if you're using technology and automation, you're displacing jobs from the communities. But I've been to your factories, and I know that it definitely uses less labor, but there's still a good amount of people you're working on. But I would argue that their quality of life is better in California. Oh, yeah, no. Northern California, you might commute 2 hours to go to your job site to work, and then you're 2 hours home. So you're going to go work in let's be real. The guys don't work 8 hours. They probably work 10 to 12 hours because they're all getting paid piecework. So they're going to go drive 2 hours, work 12, drive home for 12. So 14, what was that, 16 hours. So what are they going to do? Sleep for a few and run back and go do it? It's crazy. So if you can get them in, they're still making their wages. They don't have to have 2 hour commutes. Like, those quality of living is going to be very beneficial.
Absolutely, but I'd like to take that point and just deal with something. So again, there's a lot of people out here who throw things out into the ether that have no substance whatsoever behind it. And the one thing about when people say, particularly in California, when people say, "Oh, you're doing away with jobs," let's just get a few facts here. The United States construction industry as a whole is short 400,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So how can you be doing away with a job when the industry doesn't have enough people to fill the job vacancies that it has?
There you
right?
go.
That's point one. That's a fact. It is 400,000. Now, add to that, of all of the job vacancies, 87% of the vacancies that where the greatest shortages are in framing.
Mm-hmm.
87%. So there's a massive framing labour shortage in the country on top of that. Now, add this to the point, housing affordability. And this is where people don't join the dots. There is a direct correlation between the cost of housing and the lack of productivity, or, if you want to put it this way, the lack of available trades to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you are actually driving up the costs of homes by not having enough people to be able to produce the number of homes that are required, which makes homes then more unaffordable for the very people who actually work on those building sites. So if you look at the U.S. construction, and this is an important point of this is, in the last 60 years, the only sector of the U.S. economy that has declined in productivity is residential construction. Right? Now, we all know that if you produce more of something, the productivity increases, the costs go down. Well, the same is true the other way around. If your productivity declines, the on-site construction costs increase.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the housing affordability problem we have at the moment is because technology and efficiency has not been applied to the construction industry, which is driving up the costs. So quite clearly, what I would argue is quite contrary to saying that we're taking away what jobs we're doing, we are actually providing labour that's not currently available and helping to control the cost of housing, and at the same time building a more sustainable house because we have less waste. Also, on top of that, building a higher quality home because we're building it using precision engineered materials and high levels of automation in a factory. So it's actually the opposite. It's those who are saying, "Oh, we shouldn't go and use modern technology." They're the ones who are actually helping to argue to drive the cost of housing up. And in many ways, I like this one, sort of, sorry for throwing this one in, but I love the sort of the fallacy of the guy complaining about using automation in the factory, and yet the same framer or builder drives up onto his site with his Ford F-150 Platinum with all the technology in the world in that vehicle connected to his smartphone, his iPad sitting beside him, and he goes home in the evening time, switches on his 60-inch TV, orders his food by Grubhub to be delivered. Yet he wants to complain about the technology on the building site. Does he want to give up his TV and his phone and his computer and his F-150 and go back to a car that barely has a heater?
Yeah.
No. The double standard is actually incredible when you think about it, because we've all benefited. Every single one of us today has benefited. And whether that's from medical advancements or whether it's from entertainment advances or transport advances, every single one of us has benefited from the fact that items were produced in a factory. Why is housing any different? Yes. Why shouldn't people be able to take advantage of the lower costs that you can generate over the longer run by using technology and factory control conditions for housing?
Yeah. Well, I'd agree. I think you're definitely going to be turning the industry upside down. I'm a complete supporter of what you've got going on, and I'm looking forward to the time that we have a project that we can work together on. I just really excited what's happening and what you're doing. So I have appreciate you coming on the show. I do want to ask one question. So is your wife happy with you that you're able to keep her here in California?
She's happy that she's here in California. And actually, since we moved here, we had one child. Now we have four. So we have three of our children were born in the U.S. and the three of us were born in Ireland. So at least three of my children have still the opportunity to become president. So despite the fact now that we're all U.S. citizens, unfortunately I can still never be president. But hopefully some of my kids at some point in the future may be able to go there.
To leave behind. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, well, it's been no, like she's delighted. I mean, we're delighted. I mean, and I'll say this. I mean, it's coming up to St. Patrick's Day. I don't know when this podcast is going up, but it's coming up to St. Patrick's Day now. And I have to say, I mean, I never feel more proud to be an American or an Irish person, actually, than on St. Patrick's Day. Because when I see Americans celebrating Irishness, and I think of my own little country of 4 million people, and I think of the United States, the greatest country on the planet, and the influence that and maybe this goes back to disrupting the construction industry, the influence that little country of 4 million people has had in the United States. I mean, it makes you feel very proud to be Irish and live in America.
When you put it that way, it's like, it's amazing how little shifts, little paths you take in life can have, major consequential impact. So that's tremendous advice to take on. Well, again, I thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm always excited when I chat with you. I'm always excited when I see what you got going on. If you're in construction industry, I think it's fascinating to see this stuff. And I know you always have a welcome mat extended for people that want to reach out and chat with you and
absolutely
see what you have going on or talk to the people that have used you in the past. But if you want to see something crazy amazing, just like go check out your website and go check out your YouTube channel, because
and we have a brand new we have a brand new website, so this is a good time, but we have a brand new website launching end of March. Brand new, so which will reflect more of the technology that's in the new factory as opposed to what we had at the old factory. So make sure you do come back to it again, Entekra.com, anytime after the end of March.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and I hope to be in contact with you again real soon.
Thanks, Nate. Pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good one.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.